one of the producers of EVOTV, Eco Village Organizing, a new show dedicated to documenting sustainable activism in our community and showcasing the people, groups, and organizations that are trying to make our communities more livable. Cycling is seeing an amazing growth in our region. The City of Vancouver alone reported a 12% increase in people cycling to work from 1996 to 2006, and cycling now accounts for 4% of all commuters in the city. As fuel prices continue to surge, it is easy to see that this will be a trend that will continue far into the future. Municipalities in our region seem to be catching on to this fact, and we're seeing an increase in cycling infrastructure and dedicated routes. There's also a real bicycle culture in our region, and we are becoming a hub for the renaissance of a global cycling movement. For cyclists like myself, this is really a welcome development and great to see. To talk about the gentle art of cycling, I'm being joined today by representatives of some of the organizations who have been in the forefront of this revival. Keam is a director with Pedal, a not-for-profit organization that runs Our Community Bikes, the Pedal Depot, Free Bike, and Our Community Bike Club. In addition to working with Pedal, Chris writes about cycling for a variety of publications and was a member of the bid that has been awarded the right to host the VeloCity Global 2012 Cycling Conference to be held in June 2012 in Vancouver. Lori Kessler is Vice President of the Vancouver Area Cycling Coalition, a not-for-profit organization. Lori serves on the VACC board, bikes to work daily, and performs with the Bicyclettes. Lori is also a registered architect and LED coordinator for several projects, leadership, energy, and environmental design. And I've seen the Bicyclettes, they're quite a group. The Vancouver Area Cycling Coalition has nearly 1,200 members in Vancouver regions and promotes cycling through advocacy, education, and events. Some well-known VACC programs include Bike to Work Week, Bike to School Week, and streetwise cycling courses. Brian Seidman is president of Vancouver Bicycle Club. He is a 10-year resident of Vancouver and is serving his third year as president of the club. The Vancouver Bicycle Club is a non-competitive recreational cycling club for all levels of cyclists. It has been around as a volunteer-run nonprofit organization since 1976, and its roots as a club go back to 1902. Its members are adults of all ages and with a variety of backgrounds. Some ride year-round, while others are more laid back about cycling. They enjoy riding together, socializing with each other, making new friends, and meeting new people. Thanks for coming out today. I'll start off by asking you, Chris, tell us more about Our Community Bikes and some of the work that you guys have been doing.
Sure. Our Community Bikes is the retail end of Pedal, which stands for Pedal Energy Development Alternatives. And what we do is we take donations of used bikes and parts. We build new bikes, and we have parts for people who wish to work on their own bikes. What we also have is a shop space at our Main Street location where people can come in with their own bikes, put it on a stand and work on it. If they need a little help from one of our mechanics, we can offer that. Or if they want to get the whole thing done by one of our mechanics, they can do that as well. But our primary goal is about educating people, giving people the self-reliance to do some of their own maintenance. And we also work with children, teaching them bicycle safety skills, wayfinding and navigation, as well as some simple repairs.
That's great. And Pedal also has some programs like school-based programs too, don't you?
Sure. We have Our Community Bike Club. Until just this year, it was called After School Bikes. And we, in a variety of East Vancouver schools, we have a program where kids can come after school, they work on their bikes, they fix their bikes, they go for rides. They learn a lot of the same things that we're offering this year for a summer camp, which is a first for us. We have the Free Bike program, which for people who are in financial need, they can come and they can find out how to go through the process, and then they can get a free bike so that they have that mobility for themselves. And we also have the Pedal Depot, which is our satellite location, and that's where we work on a lot of the bikes that we put out for the free bike program, for the bikes that we sell as well.
Lori, the Vancouver Area Cycling Coalition has done a really amazing job in terms of advocating for cyclists in the region for many, many years. Could you tell us more about your work? And we mentioned some of your programs like Bike to Work and Bike to School Week. Perhaps you tell our viewers more about the work that the VACC has been doing in our region.
Great, thank you, David. Yeah, the VACC, we're a 1,200 member organization throughout the Vancouver region, and a nonprofit organization. We're started with volunteer based, and now we are staff run. I'm on the board of directors, and we give a voice to cycling issues in the Vancouver region. And so we promote cycling. We do this through education and through advocacy and through events. As you said, some of our major programs have been Bike to Work Week. This is really well known throughout the city and throughout the region. Most of the population have heard or participated in Bike to Work Week. We also have Bike to School Week and streetwise cycling courses. These are safety-related cycling courses and or learn how to ride cycling courses that are available both for adults and for children.
Oh, that's great. And Brian, the Vancouver Bike Club, you're kind of the grand old man of the organizations that you've been around for over 25 years, and your roots trace back to 1902. Could you tell us more about your organization and what you're trying to promote for the cycling community?
Well, thanks for inviting me today, David. The Vancouver Bike Club, I've been involved with it for about 5 years, and it's kind of a funny way I got to the Vancouver Bike Club. I was riding my bike to work regularly, and I decided I wanted to ride more. I had a bike I had bought in the 1980s. And the first place I wound up was at a Vancouver Area Cycling Coalition meeting that was at the Firehouse Library. And one of the funniest things I remember about the meeting was it was about 7 o'clock after work, and I got in there and there were about a dozen people there, and I got to be honest, it didn't smell very well because everybody had been biking for the whole day, and they were, and they were talking about getting routes, getting settled to the airport, and I got excited about all that, but in reality, I really wanted to ride. That's what I was really interested in. And it took a while, but I eventually found the Vancouver Bike Club, and we have events throughout the year. Every weekend of the year, we have a ride. Some of our rides on Saturday are usually about 3 hours. We'll go from Kitsilano to North Vancouver, or we'll go to Lonsdale Key, or we'll ride over to Richmond or to Steveston. And that's a kind of a leisure ride. And then on Sundays, our more ambitious riders will ride on a 3 or 4 hour ride at around 20K, and they'll have kind of usually a little bit more of a more formal lunch. And we have about 50 members. We have about 90 contacts of people who come throughout the year and ride with us. And we do have a long history, as you see from the website. They're also the Vancouver Bicycle Club and the VACC were actually one organization at one time, and I understand that the more political people decided to break off and go into the VACC, and the more of the recreational and tourers stayed in the Vancouver Bike Club. We also had a gentleman who was a touring guy who was very, very, very famous, John Hathaway, because he lived in Vancouver and he had the world record for circumnavigating the world bicycling, and he was a member of our club, and we actually have a small annual award that's related to him.
Yeah, great. So how would you characterize the development of cycling in our region, say, over the last 10 years?
Well, I think we're doing okay. I know a lot of people think that Vancouver is right at the forefront of cycling. The reality is maybe we're in the top 10, say, if you look at North American cities, but we're by no means a leader. We have a lot of work to do here.
I see.
But it has really been exploding in the last 10 years, if we look at that example. We have increased bicycle infrastructure, we have increased people going on trips using their bicycles, and there's been much more increase in the interest both on provincial as well as municipal levels as far as getting those numbers higher and becoming a larger portion of the road share. So it's an exciting time when times are changing, and it's good to be here.
How would you see the development, Brian?
Well, you know, the one bicycle infrastructure thing that I love that was developed was the TransLink bridge that's part of the Canada line, because that gives you a safe passage, a dedicated safe passage from Vancouver to Richmond that you can go on, where you do not have to be exposed to fumes or traffic. And I just think that that is just fantastic. And I know the VACC was part of that, and TransLink was part of that, and I just think that's a really, like, a super infrastructure improvement. I mean, Lions Gate also is good. They've improved the bike lane on there, and they've also improved the maintenance of the bike lane there. So if you ride there on a Saturday in the winter, it's not going to be full of road debris anymore. And those things are important. It's one thing to build infrastructure. It's another thing to maintain that infrastructure to make sure it's usable year-round for people who use their bicycles as a real way of transportation. Mm-hmm. And so that's an area that I think is like an ongoing area. It's one thing to build it. It's another thing to make it usable. The Central Valley Greenway is something that our club uses. That's also another route that is involved with public transit. That's the new TransLink line, and it follows that route. And that route is good, but you know, it's still developing. It needs better signage. It's also not paved in some areas, or it's muddy at some of the times of the year. So you know, there's still things to go. You know,
I think for me, one of the things I really noticed is I remember critical mass. And, you know, say 10 years ago, you know, a small group would get together last Friday of every month and ride from the art gallery. And eventually, I mean, critical mass just became such a victim of its own success because it had such a massive number of people, you know, taking part, that it had such an incredible impact on transportation for that Friday that it took place. Anybody care to comment on that?
Do we have to? You know, well, critical mass is certainly an interesting phenomenon. It certainly does give you a sense of how many riders are out there. I think it's interesting that that is just a fraction, a tiny fraction of the amount of cyclists who are out there using their bikes for transportation. So, you know, you can say, well, thousands of people showed up. Well, guess what? There's another 20, 30, 40,000 people that aren't participating, but they are riding their bikes.
Yeah, VACC actually isn't affiliated. It doesn't have any particular opinions about critical mass. We really look at integrating bicycles as a regular transportation choice, and so making this available for people of all sizes and ages, for families, and for women, and for different cultural aspects, and that includes making a more integrated, connected transportation route system, as well as being able to bring your bicycles onto the existing infrastructure. So that's onto buses and onto trains and the SkyTrain and the C-Bus. And so these are all things that VACC has really been involved with in helping to promote.
I think one of the problems is that it started getting into a bike versus car thing. And I think one of the problems is that you know, it's not an either or. We're always going to have cars. I mean, it's just a fact of life. And drivers have to realize we're also going to have cyclists. Do people have any ideas how we can sort of resolve some of the tensions between the two groups?
I think.
Go ahead, Gloria.
I think one thing in particular is to realize that people can get around in different ways. So there's not particularly a motorcycle group or a motorist group or a bicycle group or a pedestrian group. People can find different ways to go to the places that they need for different reasons. And so realizing that yes, sometimes you can drive a car, and yes, maybe 50% of the time you can take your bicycle instead, really increases that mode share and gets more people out on bikes, and lets people realize that the issues that cyclists have can be also integrated with the existing transportation too.
Well, on road sharing, I think one thing, I've come here as a cyclist. You know, I drive, and my wife and I primarily walk, like after work. One of the things that I know as a cyclist is we need safe passages to bike routes. I live off Oak Street near VGH, and I take the 10th Avenue bike route. And there's no real safe passage to the 10th Avenue bike route. I have to ride on Oak Street, which is only two blocks. But some days it is not safe to ride on Oak Street, and I have to then ride on the sidewalk because it's the safest thing. Well, a lot of people who go to VGH are going to VGH because they got health and medical problems, and they don't really need a cyclist riding on the sidewalk. So it's an issue of sharing, and it's an issue of creating workable opportunities so that all three transit groups that are, can get places without interfering with each other. I mean, I think that's the thing that the city and that the public really should be asking for. We should be asking for good routes for cars. We should be asking for good routes for public transportation, which we haven't spoken enough about, I think, already, because that's a key. We need good routes for bicyclists, and we need, pedestrians to be respected in that process.
There's one other thing that we're also striving for at the VACC is to help to integrate with education of both potential cyclists as well as people that drive cars. And so, for instance, that could take a more provincial level as far as working with ICBC or working with the driver's license exams to help incorporate more of how do cars and bicycles interact. So there is more of an education and more of an understanding between the groups.
And the reality is that when you create a separated lane or a designated bike route, people start to use it. And for the motorists who feel frustrated by having to be behind a cyclist on a narrow street or whatever, when they have those other routes, then we get out of their way, traffic flows better. So there's a real place for dedicated facilities, and Brian is absolutely right. Safety is absolutely the key issue for almost any cyclist. Short of the guys who are young, fit, and fast, everybody worries a little bit about their safety because they feel vulnerable on their bicycle sharing the road. Because we see in the news again and again that not every car driver is as, what would you call it? They're not paying as much attention as we would like. They are engaging in behaviors that are often dangerous. So, some of us would rather just have our own little space to go, and it doesn't cost a lot of money, and in the long run, everyone benefits.
And I remember Gregor Robertson hearing him talk one time, and that's sort of the problem. I mean, pedestrians have the sidewalks, drivers have the roads, where do cyclists go? And, like you're saying, Chris, I mean, like one of the things I notice about drivers, you might have to take a road test to get your driver's license, but you definitely don't have to take an intelligence test to get it. So,
well, there's lots of blame to go around. There's plenty of cyclists out there that I find frustrating. I've seen them texting on a bike. Failing to yield to pedestrians who should have priority on the streets, and breaking various laws. And regardless of whether you feel that those laws are silly or they don't apply to you, there is a public perception out there, and that's a big battle we're fighting.
I think cyclists should be encouraged to use bike routes. I mean, a lot of times, I have this little bike map I brought, that the city gives out, and I have used these routes to get to different places, and they are better than using the main surface streets. There's a little bit of a problem with that. These routes are also good for cars. So certain delivery drivers and taxi drivers will use these routes to speed from one area to another. And you'll find yourself competing you have a new type of competition now. Because these cycling routes are a little bit more effective than the lit, controlled auto routes. But I also applaud the city for using this and for passing these out and for creating the designated routes. I don't think separated routes are always going to work. Okay, I have a different opinion about that. I think that we have to share the streets when we can. I think we have to emphasize safety. A good thing that we just talked about was helmets, bicycle helmets. And there seems to be some re-emerging controversy about people wearing bike helmets or not. I'm not an expert in cycling research, but the original idea was that bicycle helmets reduced the extent of injury, the severity of injury, and saved people's lives in 60% of the instances where helmets were used. Then that research was reevaluated by an Israeli group because they were thinking about putting bike helmets in Israel. And they determined that it was only 30% of the people that would be helped by using bike helmets. But 30% of the people being helped is good enough for me to always want to wear one. And I think it's good enough for almost any cyclist to wear one. And when I ride to work in the morning, at least 25% of the people are not wearing bike helmets.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I
have
see
not
it.
seen that.
Yeah,
I've
a large
seen
number. And
maybe
particularly-
1%.
Okay, and particularly, you know which group of people I find fascinatingly don't wear helmets?
The couriers.
Young women do not wear helmets.
I have not seen that.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's just my observation. I am not, here with a counter. I'm just making an observation, and I just think that's an area where when we talk about our own safety, that's an area that I think we should be I think we do, and my club on every page says helmets are mandatory during each bike activity.
Well,
I haven't seen
I
that.
think I think the controversy around the nature of the bike helmet, from what I understand, is sort of the fact that they are mandatory. I agree with you, Brian. I always wear a helmet when I cycle. I mean, to me, it's just common sense. Having fallen and bumped my head before, I know what role that helmets play. But I think what's from what I've been reading about the controversy that's resurfaced so far is, they feel that the mandatory nature discourages people from cycling, and if they're mandatory for cyclists, why aren't they mandatory for drivers or pedestrians for that matter? So it's almost like cyclists are being it's almost like cyclists are being looked upon as being a danger. Well, driving is a danger, walking is a danger. So.
Yes.
David, if I may add, seatbelts are mandatory for automobiles, and new
helmets aren't.
automobiles have airbags and seatbelts. So there are multiple safety features built into automobiles, some that drivers have to use automatically by getting into the car and turning the ignition on, others they have to use voluntarily, and they're required. And they're also enforced more than what's enforced in cyclists. That doesn't mean I sit here and advocate heavy enforcement of cyclists. I do not, okay? But I also think that there is probably a role for some enforcement for cyclists that are being extremely negligent when they're riding around town. I think there's probably a role, and there is some enforcement. I have heard people tell me they've gotten tickets for not having bells or for, passing stoplights. So, I think there is some enforcement going on.
I think helmets should be a personal choice. If you want to wear one, then you should do so.
So, just a question here. I've only been in Canada for about 11 years. I've been a citizen for about 2 years. Hockey is such a fascinating sport here in Canada. I love it. And you know what I've learned from hockey? When you hit your head on a piece of ice, you get a concussion. If you're on a bicycle and you hit your head on a piece of asphalt and you bounce off of it, you're going to get a concussion. Shouldn't we be trying to prevent concussions? Why should hockey players have more protection? Why should hockey players have more protection than bicyclists?
And one must question the nature of a hockey game where collisions are a part of it, as opposed to cycling, where even in Vancouver we don't have a lot of serious bicycle collisions. So again,
do you know how many we have?
I haven't.
But the thing to me is that recently I was in Toronto, and their helmets are mandatory. I think it's for under 14 or 16. I'm not sure, but adults, it's like Chris was saying, a personal choice. I mean, if you go to Montreal, you see very few people wearing helmets that's cycling, and I think that's sort of the thing. I mean, why is it mandatory here and not mandatory
so
there?
if I'm hit by a 2,000-pound car on my 30-pound bike with my bicycle weight at 10 kilometers an hour, and I hit the ground, there's going to be an impact. And if I happen to hit my head during that impact, I'm going to be injured with at least a concussion and possibly more. And since we have socialized medicine in Canada, which I strongly support, we are paying for these injuries. Why wouldn't we use something to prevent it?
The VACC also believes that it should be a choice for the cyclist users themselves. They agree that yes, they encourage the use of helmets, just in the same way that we encourage the use of safety cycling vests, but at the same time, to maintain that it must be a law that you must not take any trips without having your cycling vest or without having your cycling helmet, it poses some considerable restraints upon using bicycles and getting the mode share up, and so there's a variety of reasons that we take that stand.
So I guess this is just a debate that's going to go on.
Yeah.
So, and what keeps you all hopeful? Like, what inspires you to keep going in the work that you're doing and, you know, working towards making our community a better place?
Someone else want to go first while I think about it?
I actually started riding my bike because I wanted to get more fit. And I remembered as a kid that I liked riding my bike. And one of the first events I went to was, I think it was like a VACC bike day in June. And I met someone who owns a bike shop, and she evaluated my bike for free and said I needed to do these things and these things. And I did some of those things, and I actually went to on Main Street to the bike shop, and they helped me do a couple of things, and I spent a little money, and you know, before I knew it, I was cycling. And just this spring, I went to Vancouver Island and cycled in Sandwich with our bike club for the day. And it's a difficult but beautiful ride. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I was like, wow, I did this. These hills, you know, I rode up all those hills. I had this great day, and I came home, and I thought, you know, this is why I do this. It's just a fantastic feeling to be able to see all those different things, to challenge yourself physically, to interact with people. I mean, that's why I cycle. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, and it makes a lot of sense. It's a great community. But what really keeps me going and interested in the work that I do is the results that we see as well. So we're seeing more and more people on their bikes. I've been biking downtown to work every day for the last 7 or 8 years. I've seen more and more people on their bikes. I see much more dialogue happening between the city and between different levels of government. I see increased bicycle infrastructure and safety, and a greater variety of people types that are on their bikes, and it's all very rewarding, and it makes this a very exciting time.
Yeah, I think for me too, it's also the people I see on bicycles that I wouldn't have expected to. A few months ago, I was waiting for the bus, and there goes one of Vancouver's most famous theater directors, and he's dressed for business, and he's on his bike, and he's going somewhere. When I see perhaps an older lady on her bike, or a family on their bike, I'm like, okay, these are the benefits that we're seeing from the work we do. And to go back slightly, I thought of one thing that I would like to see as well. It would be for cycling to be depoliticized. I think that too often right now we're seeing cycling and cycling infrastructure being used as a blunt instrument in political battles, and I think that most people are behind the idea of safety for everyone. And I think that it's used as a wedge issue, and I think that's a bit irresponsible.